call me a Sonic Mania the way I'm up in this was straight to you. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Games Kids. Today, and only today, we are here with some pretty breaking and shocking news, and we got our first look at Sonic Mania 2. So sit down, strap in, we've got a big discussion video ahead of us, and please, as always, make sure to subscribe to your boys, support the content. We're about to have a fun week with Gamescom, more Sonic racing stuff, etc. But holy shit, we got a big one today. But before we get into that, right, before we get into what caused this, what brought this news into light, this mega drop, was the anniversary of Sonic Mania. That's right, Sonic Mania is now 8 years old, guys. Can you believe that and process that? Think about where you were 8 years ago. Let me know in the comment section below. I'll never forget what was going on 8 years ago. Is I was actually working, I was doing a summer internship at like a tech company. I was still in university, and I specifically remember ending my internship a week early than it was supposed to, and I said I had to go on vacation, but it literally was just because I wanted to sit down and legitimately just play Sonic Mania for a damn week straight, and that I did, bro. I was hooked on that game. I was addicted to, time trials and beating the game. I remember I was like, I'm gonna beat the game with Sonic. I'm gonna beat the game with Tails. I'm gonna beat the game with Knuckles. I'm gonna beat the game with Sonic and Tails. I'm gonna beat the game with this and that. Like, I was trying to do every permutation of a team you possibly could, trying to get all the medals. Like, I was on crack with that game, and obviously we all adored that game. It's one of the most beloved games in the franchise, right? And remember that the game was always a passion project and something that was important to the series at a time where like things felt a little bit low, right? If you remember, at this time we were just years past the big Sonic Boom initiative in the West, which was not really a nice thing to go through, right? We had to deal with that, and then obviously we had the big we had Sonic Lost World, which didn't really hit. And so really after Sonic Generations in what was it, 2011 or 2012, at that point Sonic franchise was in a little bit of like a downward. We were seeing less of the character. He was stuck on Wii U. We weren't really getting much until that big 25th anniversary event, right, where they announced Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces, the next two big projects for the franchise. And obviously Forces is Forces, the reveal was that, but Mania's reveal felt something out of a magical comic book, especially because the last 2D Sonic game we had gotten from Sonic Team and Sega really was Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2. So to go from that to Sonic Mania, like that gorgeous art style, one of my favorite reveals, where they're going backwards. You all know this reveal. You all love it. We see our first look at Studiopolis. We get a Green Hill look. Like, you get the amazing music by Hyper Potions. It felt like something out of a fan project, right? Something where it's like, all right, let's just bring back the past, And obviously the game was always meant to be a love letter to the series. There's always people that are like, well, Mania doesn't really have a lot of original new levels. Well, yeah, that's the point. It was meant to be, a game celebrating the past, and they threw in some new levels just, to spice things up. But ultimately, the game was fantastic. It was one of the best reviewed Sonic games ever. It was just an entirely beloved game by even Games Media. It felt good for the longest time to get a review of Sonic games from like the press that was like, damn, that was a damn good video game. Like, there was no asterisks or but, like, oh, but it's Sonic. It just felt like pure love. It's one of those games that ooze that, from start to finish. And while I know a lot of people like to point out that ultimately it didn't sell incredibly well, right? So maybe a few million copies in its lifetime, it's still a game that I think had a mega impact on the franchise. I mean, you had the helm of it being basically, professionals in the industry that were huge Sonic fans. You had Christian Whitehead and his team helming the project, right? Who, he worked on mobile ports of Sonic games, but the best versions of those mobile ports that people really ended up loving. And so to put him on the project, as well as Tyson Hess on, art and stuff like Sonic Mania Adventures, has truly changed the trajectory of this franchise. I mean, you think about the movies, right? If Tyson Hess wasn't involved with Sonic Mania and got so big from that, who knows if he would have been called in for the movies to do the redesign? Who knows if at that point he wouldn't, have been one of the leaders, lead supervisors, writers on, the next movies, like, or producers. Like, his influence alone on the movies is huge. And so you could argue, while it wasn't necessarily the biggest game in terms of sales, it truly did have a mega big impact on the series overall. And so obviously with that came hopes of a Mania 2. People for years were saying, where's Mania 2? What's going on? And so when Christian Whitehead and his team announced that they were making their own development studio called Evening Star and that they were working on their own 3D platformer new IP, it left a lot of people confused. Obviously, you know, you want to cheer for the little guy that wants to do his dream and do his thing, right? But it always left people confused. Where's the Mania 2? Now, we did get the answer eventually of what they ended up doing, right? And we'll talk about that a bit. But today, we got a bombshell dropped on us. That's right, Christian Whitehead casually over here saying it is now the 8th anniversary of Mania. So time to dig up some Sonic trivia. This year, it's Kanga Klanga, aka the Kangas. This lovable Robo-Roo originally lived in the Outback, but now entertains us all in Pinball Carnival Zone. So, you know, think you read this, you're like, oh, like this is an enemy that made it into Sonic Superstars. Yay. No. If you click this image and you look down here at this description, that's right, everybody. I want y'all to read this with me. All right, I'm gonna clarify this up with you. And there it is, the big 2025 news drop. Kanga Klanga Badnik, as it appears in a 2.5D prototype Evening Star worked on after Sonic Mania. It is balancing on its tail and kicking forward with its springy roof feet. Sonic is knocked to the left with significant kinetic force. And yeah, that is what has set, you know, the internet ablaze. Here we go, our first full official screenshot of what would be the successor to Sonic Mania. A more arts, I gotta kind of grab this screenshot and open it in YouTube. There we go. A sort of like, you know, more 2.5D art style change Sonic game. Obviously, this is a prototype. Ultimately, you know, this wouldn't necessarily have been out fully looked, but you know, this is what it would have been. You know, we have this enemy chasing us. We have this like really cool art style for Sonic, which is like almost like hand drawn, right? And I love this. Obviously, again, you can kind of tell it's a prototype. The surfaces are a little bit flat. You know, you don't have a lot of depth on this. I'm sure they would have worked on that a little bit. But yeah, this is like a huge news nuke. And then it got even crazier. So then T Lopes, as a lot of you know, one of the main composers that worked on a lot of the tracks and remixes in Mania, dropped that there was a song for this level. On my 8th anniversary of Hedgehog, I give you the Outback. So I guess this was gonna be called, you know, Outback Skirts or something. Let's listen to this song, man. Oh, man. Oh, I love the vibes, dude. I love the vibes, man. It's so T, bro. It's so T Lopes over here, man. Ah. There it is. There. This is where it truly feels like it starts. And man, like, what a nice striking, like if this is the first level, what a striking first look. You know, a more Rocky Mountain-like design, which we don't really have a Rocky Mountain Sonic level, right? Very Dragon Ball inspired. Oh my God. I can't believe this song was just in the back burner somewhere, man. Ooh. Yeah. Oh my God, man. I love shit like this, dude. The vaults of video games, man. Da-na-na-da-na-na. Yeah. Oh, we love that shit. Yeah. And man, the Outback, dude. Good shit, team. That's what we love to see, man. That's what we love to see. I really do love so much of this screenshot because you know what's interesting too is if you look at the color palette of this screenshot, right, you can see that this looks super like you know, the game that they did end up making at Evening Star, which was Penny's Big Breakaway. Penny's Big Breakaway, you know, is their big 3D platform that they ended up working on, and you can tell, I mean, the DNA here, right? It's the same color palette. You know, if you just go back and forth, like you can just almost blur it together. Obviously, they were going for a big Sega Saturn inspired look with it, but it just feels so real. I don't even, are they even like allowed to drop this? This feels like a mega breach of like NDA or something, but maybe they are allowed. I don't think Christian Whitehead would ruin their relationship with Sega. And you know, I saw a lot of people online, this just caused a big discussion online about like, oh, we were robbed, you know, we got superstars instead of this, oh, we were right there, like, and of course I question a lot of this, but people forget we had this discussion in 2023 and this question was indeed answered. If you forget or you don't remember, we read an article in 2023 from Game Informer that did give us the exact reason why this didn't get done. And now that we have this art piece, we can get a bit more clarity on this article, you know, and how it's changed. So there was a period after the development of Sonic Mania when we worked with them to consider concepts for the next generation of classic Sonic, Izuka says. It's too bad that it didn't become a finished game. Still, I'm pleased that the next generation of classic Sonic that we talked about with them has been achieved with superstars, right? Which, you know, that's PR talk. Of course he's gonna say that, but here's really what ended up happening here, right? One major hurdle to providing a true success for Sonic Mania is that Izuka and Sonic Team wanted to move away from the pixel art graphics with the next new title in the classic Sonic series. When you make a 2D game using pixel art, you kind of end up targeting a very specific core audience, he says. We want to bring this game to as many people as possible in order to really make it look and feel as appealing to a wider audience. We needed to use the 3D assets to really give it that current look, but we do know that core fans want the old classic Sonic look. They want that old classic Sonic feel, so we focused on making sure the controls were solid look and feel and really representative of classic Sonic game. Now, obviously, you know, there's been a lot of chatter over the years about Sonic Superstars, right? It feels like this is a weird game where like no one thinks Superstars is bad. It just kind of thinks it's bland, right? But this is again the sad reality of video games, right? There is a perception that sprite work for video games is lesser, right? That it makes a game feel smaller. I mean, think of a game that actually just came out. There's a game that just came out. I think it's from Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. This is like a 2D platformer, you know, pixel art side scroller. No one's talking about it. You know what I mean? Like a few people are really enjoying it, but what's the big headliner today for that series? Ninja Gaiden 4, which is coming out later this year and looks crazy, right? And again, even though this Ragebound game is getting a lot of amazing reviews, it's probably not going to sell much. You know why? Because it's sprite-based, right? Like I said, there is a perception that, you know, sprite-based games are lesser for some reason. Now, this isn't always the case. There have been massive modern-day sprite-based game successors. I mean, you think of Mario Maker. It sold about, you know, 5 million copies, and that has a lot of sprites, but it is Mario. The biggest example I could think of is like Stardew Valley, right? Stardew Valley is a massive success, 15 to 20 million copies plus sold on a sprite-based game. So there are possibilities for sprite-based games to succeed and do well. But I think when it comes to AAA games as opposed to indie games, like AAA IPs, right? Because Sonic is one of the biggest IPs in the world. There is a perception that, you know, this sprite-based game is sort of lesser, right? And so even here, right, we actually get finally an answer to this, right, where Whitehead backs up the story with his own recounting of the events. When we started Evening Star, it was always our goal to move beyond 2D pixel art into 3D games, right? And develop an all-new original IP. So they always want to make, you know, what's her name? Penny's big breakaway. Evening Star did work with Sega to explore possible directions classic Sonic could go after the success of Mania. Mania 2 was never in development, though, because we actually agreed early on that we should try to make something fresh, like a hand-drawn 2D or 2.5D. At the same time, Evening Star was developing our new Star engine, so we also ended up making a cool Sonic prototype that played with 2.5D and some other gameplay ideas. And finally, we have what that would end up being with these two screenshots of Sonic, what I guess, you know, would have been not Sonic Mania 2, but the future of the Sonic Mania or 2D Sonic franchise. And man, looking at the screenshot, obviously there's not a lot to go off of. I still want this to happen. I don't necessarily think they have to do it like this exact art style. I did see a lot of people criticize that, you know, the art style does look a little bit bland, but you gotta remember, this is a prototype. Like, video game prototypes are like the bare minimum of a game's look. You know what I mean? It's literally just like, here's our loose idea of what we want it to look like. But could you imagine this art style refined, the depth? If they said they wanted this to be 2.5D, we would have had a lot more depth in these environments. You know, the rocks probably wouldn't have been flat surfaces. They probably would have been like, you know, a little bit more 3D. But the idea of exploring a more art style based 2D Sonic is exciting to me, and something that we still have yet to see, right? Because think of Sonic 4, right? Sonic 4 went with, you know, regular 3D models, right? You think of Sonic Mania, that was sprite-based, that was fantastic. And then, you know, since then they went normal with Superstars. And even if you look at a game like Shadow Gens, you know, they do the 2D levels with the 3D models and everything. And so exploring a like actual like hand-drawn 2D 2.5D art style just seems so much more interesting. You know, what's crazy to me, right? And when I think back looking at this the article that they went with here, you know, Whitehead also dashed away one of the big points of speculation among Sonic fans that Sonic Mania 2 falling through as the result of bad blood between Sega and members of Evening Star. Contrary to any rumors, we maintain a friendly relationship with Sega and hope fans are pumped to play both games once they release. I mean, I believe this, right? I believe that they're still friends with Sonic Team. I feel like actually they wouldn't have dropped this, you know, thing on the timeline today if they didn't feel like, you know, they were cool with Sonic Team. I don't think they would give them a big fuck you and drop like something. I feel like they probably got the okay to drop this stuff. And remember, Christian Whitehead and the team still were very involved in the early stages of Superstars, right? The team referenced not only Mania, but we referenced Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Mania when we were creating Sonic Superstars. Izuka says, the game was created from zero, from absolutely nothing, but we were still looking for all those 4 classic games and creating physics that are going to match and feel what classic series needs to be from scratch. When we're talking about the classic series and now we're referencing the physics, those are the 4 titles we look at, right? Because of all that, Sonic Superstars looks not to be Sonic Mania 2 that may envisioned or expected, but instead a spiritual successor. Now, here's still the thing that bothers me, right? This is the one thing that, like, you know, my positivity and joy can still not really look through, is I just don't know what compelled them to go to Arzest, right? Because if you look, dude, like Arzest, you know, why would you go to them when this was their catalog? You know, like their catalog was Balan, Yoshi's New World, Hey Pikmin. I guess they had some involvement with Sega at the time with Martin Sonic, and like Boost Beast. Like that's what really is the big shocker to me, and what really confuses me is why did they go with Arzest on this game? Not that they did like an awful job. Again, they got the physics then, but I feel like you can tell the reason Superstars has this very like simplistic look in its screenshots and art style is just because Arzest doesn't know or have like a really big heavy art direction team. Like this right in this article here where it says a lot of the things we talked about with Christian, you know, let's make it visually rich game that's not based in pixel. Let's not do the Mania thing of reusing stuff. Let's make something brand new with all new levels. That's where the start of the concept happened after Mania, but everything came to a stop, Izuka says, when we kicked off on Superstars with Oshima-san's team. A lot of conversations that we had with Christian were already in our heads. We did start creating a new game in a similar vein. Let's make something new and let's make something not pixel, which again, I understand if you don't want to do pixel art. I get it. Again, it makes games smaller, like we were talking about, but like, man, if you look at this, I would have loved a level like this or a palette like this to be translated into 3D. The biggest criticism that Sonic Superstars has, and I even said this from my day one review, and you know, that's really a lot of people's criticism, is it feels very New Super Mario Bros. Wii, right? It feels like, you know, if anything, the game kind of starts a little bit more exciting. You have, you know, a Green Hills like area, but it has like these beautiful waterfalls and rainbows in the backgrounds. But then it just kind of feels it goes back to normal. Like you get a forest, you get a regular beach, you get, you know, a regular factory, right? It just, and you know, the only really visually unique levels are in the game are like the carnival, which, you know, a lot of people still say we've had carnivals, but I still like the look of it. And obviously that one like voxel level that they have later in the game. But besides that, like the space station at the end is pretty generic. Like all the areas you go to, Golden Capital just feels boring. Like the only thing about it is like it's golden, you know what I mean? But it doesn't feel like it has a strong identity, right? And the character models I think are really cute. Like I think they're translated pretty well into 3D in those games, right? But it still feels like it lacks a unique visual identity, right? And that's the biggest criticism with Superstars. I think that's why people are freaking out seeing this, because I think moving past, you know, the pixel art into something more artistic based felt like that would have been the right call. And of course, look, at the end of the day, I have a lot of my problems with Penny's Big Breakaway, which is the game that Evening Star ended up working on, but I can at least commend them for working on something they wanted to. And clearly, again, like we said, the color palette is extremely similar. It plays exactly like a very Sega Saturn game, right? It's what they wanted to do, right? But I can't help but feel in my heart of hearts that there's something we could have worked out here to get this game done, right? Because again, like I said, going with Arzest is my biggest question mark, right? And now it has me thinking, right? Like, what's next, right? What are we gonna get next with Classic Sonic? Because we've talked about this a lot before. It's very, very up in the air. I mean, we might know the future of 2D Sonic by next year, right? Because by next year, Sonic Superstars will be 3 years old. I think that's more than enough time for a team to be working on it, because there's 3 options they can take, right? Either Evening Star and Sega maybe go back to the bullet board together and work on a 2D Sonic game, maybe complete this vision, which I would love to see. I would love to see a Sega Saturn inspired 2D Sonic game. I think that's such a fucking awesome idea, and I hope this comes to light one day. I feel like they would do it. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind if Azuka and the team was like, hey, do you guys want to do this? And you had T on the side and Tyson and everybody like come back together, one last hurrah for a sick 2D Sonic game. I feel like they would do it with all brand new original levels with their own new looks. Oh god, it would be fucking awesome, right? So that's option 1. Option 2 is that Sonic Team continues to work with Arzest. And now, again, if we talk about this right now, there's always, again, there's 2 camps on this, right? On one hand, right, I would prefer if Sonic Team made the game internally, right? Because like, I mean, could you imagine like, hey, if Sonic Team was like, you know what, like, dude, we just made Sonic Racing Crossroads internally, right? We're working on all our games internally. I feel like we should be at home with 2D Sonic. I feel like that would be a bold move, and I think that would be a power move. It would be nice to hear like, hey, we here at Sonic Team are working on the next 2D Sonic game. We're not giving it out to anybody. We have people that have worked exterior working on the game with us. We have a Christian Whitehead, we have, what's it called? We have our own guys. We have a few people from Arzest that knew what they were doing. But like, what if we internally did what we had to? Because the thing is, the foundation is there. That's the thing what's crazy here is like all the puzzle pieces are here, right? Superstars was all new original levels. They have the exact physics from Mania and the last, old 2D games, right? All we need is an identity, like a striking visual identity for the game, and maybe some new cool ideas. And I think you're good, dog. Like, I think that's really what you need to do here with the future of 2D Sonic. Now, I also think on the flip side, now that Arzest has at least proven that they know how to make a 2D Sonic game with Sonic Team, right? I feel like they could have a second spot. I feel like it's always good to give a team that's worked on something a second chance, because you're like, all right, well, listen, now you're familiar with this, right? Now you know what's going on here, and now we can improve. We can make something crazy. We can work together, building blocks. It's important to make building blocks and have healthy relationships with developers so that you can, make something bigger and better every single time, right? I wonder, like, this is something super random. I wonder if maybe there would have been a gimmick here where like maybe you could press like, R1 and down B to like sort of flip Sonic over to these platforms, and maybe there's like unique platforming sections in this front side. I don't know. Maybe that's just me huffing some copium and hopium there, but I just think, and I'm sure a lot of you agree with me on this, that like the future of 2D Sonic is super weird, because I feel like, remember, they even said Sonic Superstars was a failure internally. Like, they said it didn't meet their sales margin, but we did find out recently that the game sold about like 2.5 million copies, which is still a lot of damn copies for a game that people thought, you know, flopped or didn't do well, right? And so maybe a Sonic team with how huge, you know, Shadow Gens has been, Frontiers has been, a movie has been, be like, well, guys, it might be time to sunset classic Sonic. But at the same time, like, classic Sonic feels age. It's hard. It's hard to tell, right? Because Sonic's a weird franchise, right? You know, it's a weird series where people love different eras of it, different styles of it, especially when it comes to 2D Sonic. It's like, do people want sprite-based? Do they want a new 2D art style one? Let me know, of course, in the comment section below what you want. Do they want a rush style game? Do they want to do an advanced style game? Like, there's so many things they could do, but obviously you don't have enough hands to do all of it. You got to take one project at a time, especially with how long games take today, right? But I do think, first and foremost, I just want a good game. I want a Sonic game with identity, right? I feel like that's what sets Sonic games apart. Especially, you know, you have a lot of people nowadays talk about like Sonic art style. They'll be like, oh man, Sonic in the 2000s was so cool, right? And it came down to the artwork, the way areas were designed, how levels looked, right? And I get that to an extent, right? Because people criticize, you know, Sonic Frontiers or Shadow Gens. Obviously, Shadow Gens is like a remake of old games, so it's in a bit of a unique position. But they look at, you know, something like Sonic Frontiers and say like the environments aren't super Sonic-like. But I think that's the point of that game, so I'm fine with that. But like, you think of, you know, a Sonic Colors with how cool, you know, the space amusement park aesthetic is. You think of Sonic, you know, what's it called? Sonic Unleashed with, you know, the travel around the world look. You think of the Black Knight. You think of Secret Rings. Like, even 06 for the environments it goes. Like, Sonic games have always had a identity with, you know, environments, especially, you know, you go back all the way to the classic games, right? Like, to this day, people adore your chemical plants, your sky sanctuaries, you know, your lava reefs, your Starlight Valley zones, you know, your carnival zones. Like, all these levels have had a visual identity that's super rich and memorable. It's always what sets Sonic apart from Mario to me. Whenever I play, like, I've thought about this as I've grown up, like, right, like with Mario, I love playing those games, but like, I don't think of, like, when I think of Mario 3, which is one of my favorite games, I'm like, what's a one area that's striking? I mean, not they all kind of have the same palette. You know, it's just about like the level design being super good. Whereas like with Sonic, it's always been like the palette and the look of a level stands out so much. You could name your favorite Sonic zones. It's very hard to name your old school favorite Mario level. I mean, you could name some areas, right? Of course, like you think of like Mario World, like I like, you know, the big dino levels, right? Or, you know, the forest ones, which are really cool. But like, it's not the same as being like, man, I really love, you know, this chemical plant. I really love, you know, ice cap zone. You know, it's like an identifiable name. And I think that's a big issue that Sonic Superstars faced that I hope they're able to fix with whatever they do in the future. This screenshot just, oh man, bro, it sends me so ablaze, you know, just because, not that I got that Microsoft thingy, right, or that Microsoft notification, but just like, it's such a nice style that I would have loved to see like refined. You know what I mean? Like, this style is so cool. It would have just been so nice to say, like, what would it have looked like in a year, right? Where the art style is refined, we possibly got more characters. I don't get sad thinking about it, but I'm like, man, Christian Wyatt just dropping this made me really think about what I want to see in the future, right? And I really think, especially, you know, you think of Mario Wonder that came out, you know, 2 years, you know, that same week as Superstars, and you just felt like, man, Sonic Superstars is cool, but what Mario Wonder just did for 2D Mario was such a breath of fresh air, right? You had these incredible animations for the characters, down to like, you know, Mario going in a pipe and like grabbing his hat at the end of it, you know, down to animations of like, you know, them crawling, down to looking up while moving left and right. Like, Mario Wonder is such a breath of fresh air, and I want that moment again for 2D Sonic. It's been far too long. We are now again 8 years removed since Sonic Mania, and I'm still thinking about Sonic Mania, right? And I think that says a lot about that game. And again, while Superstars is cool, step in the right direction, like I like the vibe of it, it doesn't have that mental staying power in the same way. Now, what would have happened if Sonic Superstars had this art style, right? I feel like it would have stood out a lot more. You know, here's a perfect way to summarize this and explain this. Whenever I want to talk about Sonic Superstars, right, like the difference, like for example, if you look at this art piece over here, right, of like this level. How it looks in this art is so much more striking than how it looks in game, right? Or a huge example of this is right here. I think this is exactly what I mean. In this art piece, the beach level looks so much more Sonic-like, right? Where like you have like vines everywhere as well as the beach aesthetic, right? It has like more murals on it. And then when you look at it in game, it just looks a bit more plastic. And I think that's really what's lacking. It is just that striking look. Like the level and ideas are good. I just want that striking look. And again, that's why this is blowing up the way it does, because right away you look at this and you're like, whoa, that is a striking look. Anyways, yeah, that's my big ramble. Sorry if I went on for a while. It's just, you know, this is a big deal. We just got a random first look at what possibly could have been Mania 2. And I know a lot of you wanted me to talk about this and are probably, you know, excited to yap in the comment section below about it. So yeah, that's what Mania 2 would have been like. But guys, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys would have liked to see. Do you think we'll ever see something like this ever again? Do you think 2D Classic Sonic is shelved? What do you think is going to happen? Of course, I love you. Thank y'all for watching. And of course, I'll see you all next time. Peace out.